All right, fellas. I believe we are live now, hopefully. So, this is Samuel the Infamous. We're trying something a little bit different. We're going to do a solo stream tonight, probably a short one. We'll see how it goes. Everything that's going on in the world today is kind of shit. Now, I am not going to be doing a lot of political stuff on this channel. It'll come up from time to time, as topics always do, but I like to keep things a little varied. I prefer to be able to discuss anything we like, so I don't want to pigeonhole myself. And I realize that's bad for the algorithm, that the algorithm requires that you focus on a specific topic or a specific genre or a specific interest to be promoted in the algorithm, and that's fine. We may never see any kind of real numbers, and that's okay with me, because I'm doing this because I enjoy it. That said, everything that's come up in the last couple of days regarding our POTUS, and by our POTUS, I mean the guy that other people voted in, because I certainly didn't vote for him, it has been kind of troubling of late. It's just, it is what it is. And before we get too much further, Mama Susan, I know you're not usually listening to channels as small as mine, but just in case, I'm not an expert in anything. I don't claim to be, and so you can fuck right off. How's that? Moving on. So we've got a couple of articles I want to go over tonight a little bit, and I'll bring those up here in just a second. It's not great. Things that old Joe has said here in the last week or so, and especially last night, have come off rather threatening to the people of the United States, which is a very bad thing. One thing I've noticed that the left tends to overlook is that when we are, say, defending the Second Amendment or defending the First Amendment or the Fourth Amendment or the Eighth Amendment, that benefits all of us, them too. If one of them goes down, Second Amendment goes away, right? We no longer have the right to bear arms. We get disarmed, right? That hurts them too. And I know that they don't see it that way, and that's fine. We can disagree on that. That's, but the fact is it does hurt them. It hurts them. It hurts us. It hurts everyone who's a citizen of this country. Defending free speech goes for all of us, including people who we disagree with. I'm a free speech absolutist. I absolutely believe that if you want to say something, you should be able to. Obviously, there are some legal exceptions to that, such as shouting fire in a theater, excuse me, calling in bomb threats, that kind of thing. Obviously, those sorts of things are not good, and you don't want to be starting up mobs and going after people with pitchforks and that kind of thing either. That kind of rhetoric generally just gets people killed, and it doesn't do anybody any real favors. And there's reasons why that sort of thing is illegal. I mean, the fire in a theater thing. If you shout fire in a theater and everybody panics, which is likely to happen in a dark room, crowded, nobody can really see what's going on, you're going to get some panic, and likely people are going to get trampled, possibly to death. And some of those may be children, and it's a bad idea. And there's a reason that saying shouting fire in a theater, especially a crowded one, is illegal. The reason for that is because people will get hurt. There's real world consequences to that. Whereas misgendering somebody, when they say we're literally killing people because we're not using their gender, that's bullshit. It absolutely is. Right. You're not literally killing anybody with words. That word gets used far too often. Literally too often, and it's become watered down like so many other things these days, to the point where it no longer means what it should. So yeah, I believe you should say whatever you should say, whatever you feel like you you should say or you want to say, and I think that that's a good thing because it allows us to criticize those in office. It allows us to criticize those who see themselves as our betters. It allows us to criticize our neighbors. Um, it allows us to praise them too. You know, you can praise anybody you like. You know, so I mean it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Yeah, there can be some problems. Obviously, if you get like 1,000 people on the internet telling you to kill yourself and then you do it, obviously there was a cause and effect there. There was some buildup, but there was also a choice by the person who did the deed. So it's free speech can be tricky, but it must be protected in the absolute, because if it is not protected in the absolute, if we make concessions anywhere um, in terms of general speech, then they'll start making concessions where there shouldn't be any. And then that's where you get shit like Canada's hate speech laws, for example, or the online harassment laws in UK, which, I mean, you can go to jail in both of those countries for telling a joke, and they're supposed to be part of the um, quote unquote free societies of the West. You'd expect that kind of thing in like North Korea, for example, where apparently the leader of that country has no anus, which begs the question, what happens to all the food that he consumes? Because he clearly consumes some food. The man's not thin. you know? um, but if you were to say otherwise in that country, especially as a citizen of that country, but I'm sure that they would treat non-citizens just as poorly were you within their borders and their reach. Um, you can be disappeared for talking about these things. It's not good. Um, and the reason that the First Amendment enshrines free speech in our Constitution is because it was believed by our founders, and I believe they were right, that it is a fundamental human right, not given to us by the government, not granted to us by the government. I hesitate to say by God because, I mean, if you've been following for a little while, or you've caught me on the Exiled Lioness live streams, it's not really my thing, the whole God's thing. But I do believe that we do have certain rights that, just are. Yeah. And we should protect those. We should protect those, not just for ourselves, but for our children and their children and their children's children. If we let it fall now, or at any point in the near future or the far future, then the suffering down the line will be pretty untold. And seeing as how we're referred to often, this country is referred to, typically by people on the right, not always by people in this country, as a shining beacon on a hill. And I believe that phrase actually comes from a biblical passage. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head which one. Referring to the fact that this great experiment that we call the U.S.A. is the best example of a free society that we've ever seen on the face of this earth. Obviously, it's had problems. It's not perfect, but it can't be perfect because people aren't perfect. I've long said, and I'm only half joking when I say this, that all of the problems in the world can be boiled down to one common denominator, and that's people. People are the problem. No more people, no more problems. However, I am half joking when I say that. I don't support Darth Schwab's policies. I'm not on board with the Georgia Guidestone crap. I don't believe that in order to save a few, we should murder billions. I think that's messed up. Unfortunately, many of our leaders do, and I use the word leaders here very loosely, do fall in line with that kind of thinking. And several of them are actual disciples of the man. The two that come off the top of my head would be Trudeau in Canada, number one, and look what he's doing up there. I mean, it's a mess. And then The other one being Gavin Newsom, governor of California, who is turning that state, a sizable state with a sizable population, into a dystopian Hunger Games looking hellscape. And I mean, California is fucked. you know, I don't know that they can come back from that, even if they decide to change course right now. I think a lot of the infrastructural damage has already been done. Um, it might be one of those kind of need to burn it down to build it up again kind of situations. And I hesitate to say that because I'm not advocating for destruction of it in any way. But I mean, in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of the systems that they got in place over there, the laws especially should all be scrapped. And then, because not everything over in California is that bad. Welcome, 7-1. Yes, California is a hellhole. It is not my favorite place to be. For a couple of reasons. I mean, number one, all the nice stuff that you see out there in the ads and in the movies and stuff is a very small portion of that state. Now, there's some nicer places wilderness-wise to the north, but most of the southern part of it, if it's not right on the beach, is a desert. I do not enjoy being in the desert. It's not fun for me. So, there are some places to the north, though. Back before the LA Kings took it over, Crescent City actually had some very cool touristy stuff way up in the north, right up on the border of the state, just above it, which is right about the southern end of the redwood forest. Very beautiful area. And they had, when I was a child, I went out there with my mother and my sister, um, and they had a lighthouse out on the edge of the city. And you go up to the top of it. They let you go up to the top, and you could see for almost 7 miles out to sea. It was amazing. It was one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life, one of the best views I've ever had. And that was in California. So, I mean, not everything about the state is bad. They've got some pretty nice mountains. The forests in the north are obviously, gorgeous. And I mean, there's no other plant on the face of the earth like a sequoia. Massive giants of trees. Beautiful. So, I mean, it's not all bad, but yeah, I liked it. But then again, the place I'm talking about, Crescent City, is been pretty much overrun by gangs since then. I mean, you got to keep in mind, I took this trip in like 1980 something, maybe early 90s, but I'm pretty sure it was late 80s. And things have changed somewhat since then. And they've had a number of really shitty governors since then. The one that I can think of off the top of my head, who was obviously at least as bad as Gavin Newsom, was Gray Davis. That guy, I mean, goddamn, you know. So, but yeah, yeah. It does. It does sound like California. It was, you know, I mean, there was a time when the gangs have always been kind of a problem there. Before the street gangs, you had like organized crime and that sort of thing. I mean, look into detail in the history of the city of Los Angeles and Los Angeles County and the surrounding areas, and it's pretty messy. There's a lot of bodies buried. Um, it's not quite on the same level of organized crime involvement as, say, Las Vegas, which was founded by mobsters and Mormons, weirdly. um, but yeah, it's not great. I mean, everywhere in this country's got its troubles. Some of them are political, some of them are like street level like that, and some of them are even regarding the climates of certain areas. Like desert areas like that, the Mojave, stupidly hot. Not my fun. Not fun for me. Death Valley is located in the Mojave, and it is, if not the hottest place on earth, definitely up there. I think it's in like the at least the top three in it, but I'm pretty sure at one point it was the number one. And it's called Death Valley for a reason. It's not like it's not a nice place to be. you know, Even the lizards think it's too hot. So, but and then you go down to like the Gulf Coast, and you get stupid high humidity and hurricanes. So there's that, lots of flooding, that sort of thing. Um, New Orleans, for example, the city is actually below sea level. They've got levee walls that hold back the Gulf, and that's actually what happened in with Hurricane Katrina. I think in 2004, the levee walls failed and it flooded the city because the city itself was constructed below sea level, which was just dumb. But as a result of that, um, they had a lot of bodies floating around the streets, which brought in predators like large crocodilians, that sort of thing. Not to mention all the diseases and stuff that came with that, with the dirty water and the just generally what bodies produce when they're left to rot. But then again, you get up to the north where I live, and we have about 2 months where it's about 100 degrees every day, and the rest of the time we're lucky if we hit 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And with the wind chill, it's not uncommon in the deep of the winter to see temperatures below 25, below zero, which is, for reference, it's only 50 more degrees or 45 more degrees below zero when steel becomes brittle and you can snap it like a twig. I mean, it's pretty cold. The kind of cold where if you're not wearing layers and you aren't limiting your amount of exposure to it, death comes pretty quickly. We've got this phenomenon up here where, and I'm sure that it occurs elsewhere in the States, but it's something that you live with when you grow up in the middle of nowhere. That we call sometimes is referred to as the twinkling death. It's like when you go outside dead of winter and it's so cold that, number one, the stars are crystal clear. It's beautiful. The sky is just gorgeous, but it's so cold that you can actually see the light from the street lamps glinting off ice crystals floating in the air right in front of you. You don't want that shit in your lungs. I mean, it is just ice, but it can freeze your lungs solid. It's super fun. And if you have a beard like I do, um, all of the exhalation that you do when you breathe in, I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen, even if you live in warmer climes, when it gets cold enough, usually below, 50, 45 degrees Fahrenheit, you get that the carbon dioxide that comes out of your mouth comes out as kind of a vapor. I mean, it always does, but it's visible then. Well, when you do that, when it gets too real cold, there's actually moisture in that, and it will freeze your facial hair solid. You end up with icicles around your mouth. It's awful. Yeah, yeah. Behind a window where you have nice central heating is the best way to see that. It's not a lot of fun to be out in for more than a few seconds. I mean, you can get frostbite in a matter of seconds. You lose feeling in your fingers real quick. It's pretty brutal. So I mean, everywhere's got their problems. Everywhere's got things that are less than pleasant, but everywhere's also got things that are nice about it. So that said, I just kind of got off on this tangent here. We'll we'll see what we see tonight. The big thing I wanted to bring up to you guys, you know, yeah, I'm not gonna lie, man. It looks cool. It does. It does not feel cool. It feels really cold and unpleasant. You could like snap your beard off, right? It's not great. And then of course, when you go back inside, it immediately melts and your whole face is soaked with cold ass water. So yeah, it's not as much fun to experience as you might think. Um, but yeah, today we are uh, talking about the things that have been said recently. I've got a couple of articles I'm going to pull up and we'll go over them a little bit. Probably just skim them. I left the links in the description, so if you guys want to read it yourself, you'll be able to. The first one's from AP News, and the second one is from Deadline, I believe. Um, and I'm not taking them as unbiased news sources. I don't believe there's any such thing these days on the right or the left. I don't believe that unbiased news can happen. I mean, people believe what they believe, and it infuses everything they do, including their writing. I mean, I think it can be limited, sure, but I don't believe it can ever be truly eliminated. Um, so, first thing we're going to bring up is this AP article. Biden sounds newly strong alarm. Trumpism menaces democracy. Now, this was, I believe, this was referring to his speech last night. I don't know if you guys caught it. I caught most of it. Uh, Timcast IRL did a watch stream that was pretty interesting, but I'd recommend watching, if you haven't seen it, watch the speech in its entirety first, because they do talk over a lot of the things he says. Now, in typical Biden fashion, there was a lot of word salad and nonsense mixed in there, but there were also some interesting things that he said. Um, okay, so and this was in Philadelphia, which is, I believe, the location of the Liberty Bell, is it not? I could be wrong. Like I said at the top of the stream, I am not an expert in anything. So take that for what you will. President Joe Biden charged in a primetime address the extreme ideology of Trump and his adherents. Adherence is an interesting word, right? And I saw in another article, and I don't remember if it's in the next one or if it was somewhere else, but they used the word fealty, which is also an interesting choice of words. Incorrect, too. I don't believe that Trump is above criticism. I happen to think he was a hell of a lot better than the current president that we have, and the one we had before that. And if I'm being honest, the one we had before that, too, and the one before that. I mean, it goes back a ways. I think probably the last good president we had, and he did some shitty things in his time, too, was Reagan. Um, All right, so adherence threatens the very foundation of our republic as he summoned Americans of all stripes, that's a lie, to help counter what he sketched as dark forces within the Republican Party trying to subvert democracy. And the number one thing, and every time he says democracy or our democracy, he, or any one of these people who say our democracy, that those are buzzwords. That's propaganda. Okay. Number one, we are not a pure democracy. We're a representative republic. Now, we have a democratic process by which we elect said representatives, but we are not a pure democracy. We never have been. Pure democracy doesn't work. It's mob rule. You know, it's just, it doesn't work. Most forms of government at some point devolve into some form of totalitarianism, which is absolute rigid control of the government, or anarchy, which is absolute lack of government, and not, in a good way. I mean, I know there's people out there who say, "Oh, I'm an anarchist and I think it'd be good for everything." I disagree. I think you end up with warlords that way. Uh, Take a look at all the little countries in the middle of Africa. you know, take a look at a lot of the countries in the former Soviet states. Um, you end up with one guy who has all of the resources, lording it over everybody else, and then along comes a bigger guy who takes those resources from him because he can't stop him. I mean, you just end up with a series of shit like that, and everybody else gets trampled underneath, and that's when chaos. You know, funny story. When Obama put out all that propaganda where he was painted up, in those images that were very, the Believe posters and the Hope and Change posters and all that stuff, and it was done up in a very, very communist kind of way, a little bit like Che Guevara. Every time it said change, I couldn't help but think of, because this was right around the time that The Dark Knight came out. And if you recall that movie, there's a moment in it where the Joker says to Harvey Dent, "I'm an agent of chaos." Right? Change is just another word for chaos. Change is neither good nor bad. It just is. And chaos is unrelenting, constant, wild, and random change. So every time he said that, I got this image in my head of him painted up like Heath Ledger from that movie, going on about I'm an agent of change. Well, in this case, chaos, and I think he did introduce some chaos into this country. Young Ripa is an anarchist to a point. I think that he actually is a little bit more libertarian than that. I don't, I know that he talks about, 100% decentralization, and to a point, I think that he's correct. I think that we should just say to hell with DC altogether. And I think I've spoken about this before. Not obviously, this is a new series of live streams, but elsewhere. I think we should just Trump was right about building the wall. He was just wrong about the location. I think it should go up around the District of Columbia, and we should call them a no man's land and get the fuck on with our lives. The states are set up to govern themselves. We don't actually need, a federal government. We really don't. As long as we still have free travel and free trade between the states and a mutual defense pact with the other states, there's no reason we can't get along without Washington entirely. Fuck them all. That's my position on it. But I don't believe that total anarchy is the right way to go. I think that the states should govern themselves. They should have small governments, obviously, but there should be something in place. Mainly because, as I said earlier, every problem in the world can be traced back to people. People are the problem. People can't be necessarily trusted to. I mean, in smaller communities, sure, you could have like communes or groups of people who agree to abide by certain rules and all that stuff, and they agree to enforce said rules and all that. That can happen, but in larger cities, that's almost impossible to deal with. And wherever there are people, more people will gather, that will congregate, and you will end up with these larger populations. Yeah, absolutely. It maintains some kind of control, that we all agree on. Now, I think that maybe we should revamp our representation, a little bit. I think that maybe nobody gets more than a 2-year term, from the governors to the reps to, all of that shit all the way down. I don't think we should pay them shit. I think they should be, if they want to eat, they need to, be able to do this as well as, whatever it is that they would normally be doing outside of office, because they should be reminded and forced to uphold their oaths and be public servants. That's what it should be. Time was Congress in this country met twice a year. They got shit done, and then they went back to their lives. They didn't get paid anything for that. It was considered a duty, like jury duty. I mean, probably not with as much stigma attached to it, but and that was that. I mean, you were elected to represent your people, so you showed up and you represented the constituents that you had, which is how it should be all across the board. I don't think we should be paying Congress anything. Most of those guys got outside deals going on anyway. I mean, look at how fucking rich Nancy Pelosi got in her time. Way more than she was being paid. Yeah. And so, and I might be wrong about any of this. Like I said, not an expert in anything, but I think that would probably be the best way to go. Now, I don't see how we're going to get there without problems along the way. I think that it's going to probably get bad. I think we're past the point of no return. I know people are still throwing around terms like peaceful divorce. I don't think that's possible. I wish it was. I do. I mean, shit keeps going the way it is. Our very children are going to learn of war with their own eyes in their own streets. Instead of hearing about it on the nightly news from some faraway country. Which they do now. But they'll see people killing their neighbors. They'll witness it. They'll probably, to an extent, be subject to it. And I don't want that for our children. I don't want that. I don't want that for our neighbors. I don't even want that for leftists. I really don't. And I don't believe that they understand what they're asking for when they call for civil war. And I know there's plenty on the right who call for it too. And I don't, they need to talk to some veterans about war. They need to talk to some veterans. Now, I'm not a veteran, just to be clear. I come from a family of them. A number of my friends, both online and off, are also veterans, including Lawrence Knight, who you guys have seen probably on the channel. Mandatory, I believe, is actually actively serving as a National Guard Reserve at the moment too. And they need to talk to people who've been through that shit, who know what war is firsthand. Because I mean, hell, when the whole Ukraine thing started, we had a bunch of high-profile people in this country, I will say, celebrities and such, and they were all for it, all for the Ukraine. And a number of them went over there, including Ben Stiller, who has famously been in pictures with Vladimir Zelensky. But the one that got me was Sean Penn, the guy who's been anti-war his entire career, also anti-Republican, also anti-conservative, also, etc. at all. Runs off at the first opportunity to join a foreign military to fight their war against another country who we have tried our level best to no longer be at the throat of. Um, but the second he sees combat, he turns around and runs like a bitch. And then for that, I don't blame him for doing that. That's the sane thing to do. It really is. You know, um, the only reason our soldiers don't do that is because we drill it into their heads that they must run towards the gunfire, not away from it. Your average person who's never seen anything like that is not going to have that reaction, because that's crazy. Crazy people do that. Crazy people dehumanize the other side so much that they're able to kill them and not feel much about it. And, I don't think that's true of every soldier. I think some of them very much feel every kill. And that's, and they should, because it's awful. It's an awful thing. Um, I guess it is what it is, but people calling for that sort of thing. And these articles indicate to me that, now I don't believe he ever outright said it flat out, but it indicates to me that that Biden is looking for, I don't want to say looking for an excuse, but he's certainly attempting to rile up one side against the other. You know, um, yeah, kind of. A lot of those guys were thrown into it, and they were done so as quickly as possible because we needed the boots on the ground over there. And so a number of them didn't react well to it because they weren't trained properly for it. And the ones who were trained for it or took to it a little too well, when they came back, they had enormous amounts of trouble reintegrating into a society because they'd been trained to murder. They'd been trained to kill. That's what they knew. It's what they were good at. That's why a lot of them ended up in things like private security and law enforcement, is because it gave them um, a place where they could use that training. I mean, obviously not necessarily in a lethal way, if at all possible, but you'd be amazed at how many veterans are in some kind of law enforcement. It's kind of staggering, actually. And a lot of them go into private security. Some of them go into other related fields, mercenary work, that kind of thing. And some of them do their level best to reintegrate with society, and some of them are successful at it, and some of them aren't. Hell, I knew a guy who came back from Iraq too, and he was back for about 2 months, and then he turned his gun on his girlfriend and then himself. You know, um, and they were trying to start a family, and it's just something in him was so broken over there that when he came back, he just could not acclimate to life. Uh, and so he became a killer and a statistic. And it's sad as hell. And part of the problem there is that we don't support our veterans when they come back. Not generally. I mean, the VA is a fucking joke. Um, the GI Bill is about all they get, and even that's I don't think that's enough of a thanks. Not for what we're asking them to do. Not even close. So, but yeah, these guys, they really should talk to some veterans. So moving on with this. All right. In his speech at Philadelphia's Independence Hall, blah, 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 unleashed the trappings of the presidency in an unusually strong and sweeping indictment of Trump and what he said has become the dominant strain of the opposition party. Now, I'm not sure what they mean by unleashed the trappings, because that sounds like he, let loose the dogs, but it could also mean like he, you know, broke out of his thing. Now, he was reading from a teleprompter the whole time, so I don't know about that. Yeah, some of the wording here is very it's very much rhetoric. It's very much designed to evoke a response, you know. And some of these new journalists think they're fucking Shakespeare, which is just hilarious to me. Now, my writing gets kind of pretentious too. So to be fair, I have no right to judge, but you know, for a news article, this is a little much. Unleashed the trappings. His broadside came barely 2 months before Americans head to the polls in bitterly contested midterm elections that Biden calls a crossroads for the nation. Too much of what's happening in our country today is not normal, he said before an audience of hundreds. Now, that statement right there, I 100% agree with, just not about what he's talking about. You know, too much of what's happening in this country is not normal, and I think there's a lot of things going wrong with that. Uh, but what he's talking about is something entirely different than I am. Said before an audience of hundreds. I think that's fucking hilarious. They got hundreds of people to show up at a Biden rally. You know how many people show up at a Trump rally on the regular? You know, I mean, just by comparison, it's embarrassing almost the numbers. I don't believe for a second that he has the support that they project that he does. Yeah, I don't even think they have the support that he thinks they do. And I don't know what he thinks because the man's clearly out of his fucking head most of the time. I mean, at the end of the speech, instead of walking away totally, right, he turned back to the microphone and he was going to say something else, but it was off teleprompter. You know, he was off script, as it were, and they had cut his mic so he couldn't say anything else. It was really fucking funny, and pretty typical these days. They have him up there doing his thing, and he's just, you know, if he goes off script for a second, they shut him down. You know, because he has a tendency to say shit that they don't want him saying. Sometimes he has a tendency to say things that are just pure nonsense anyway. You know, I refer you to the Trunanana Shabbat pressure incident. You know, all right, there we goes. This part's not in quotes. He said he wasn't condemning the 74 million people who voted for Trump in 2020, but added, there is no question that the Republican Party today is dominated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans, using the acronym for Trump's Make America Great Again campaign slogan. I don't remember who said it recently, but it's been said that there is a third party now, and it's the MAGA Party, but they're operating within the existing Republican Party because the existing Republican Party is fucking useless, and we all know it. They know it, you know, but they're still getting paid, so they don't care. Half of those guys are too much like Liz Cheney, you know, who and I've made mention of this before, guys. I am in Wyoming. She was my representative, and I was proud as hell to cast the vote for Harriet Hagman. And you know, for everybody out there, if you choose to vote, vote for who you want to. Don't let anybody tell you different. I don't care what side you're on. Vote for who you want to. It's nobody's business who that is unless you choose to share it like I just did. All right. And even then, it's your right to vote for who you want to, right or left. Doesn't matter if you're voting for Democrat, Republican, Independent, Tea Party, whatever. Although, you know, Tea Party, as I understand it, is more or less defunct at this point. You vote for who you want to. You vote for who you think is the best one to represent you, who you think is the best person to get the job, to do the job, rather. And that's how it should be. I mean, there used to be this thing in this country where it was in polite conversation, in polite society, at dinner and such, or in social gatherings. There were two subjects you never brought up. You never brought up. Religion was one, because you know, even when Protestants dominated the majority of the population in this country, and there's still a large number of them, make no mistake. But even when it was, you know, you could go into any given suburb and everybody there was some form of Protestant or other, they didn't talk about it because there are differences between the various Protestant religions that they generally don't get along about. And so you just didn't bring it up. You didn't bring it up at dinner. You didn't bring it up in social gatherings or social settings. You didn't bring it up professionally. You just don't talk about it. And frankly, I agree, it's nobody's business but yours what your religion is. And I think the same holds true of politics, which was the other topic that you just didn't bring up. If you wanted to have a nice conversation or a nice dinner, you just didn't do it, because invariably both of those topics invoke strong reactions in people, and typically emotional reactions, especially when they see the other person as the other side of that argument. And it never goes well. I mean, try bringing up politics at Thanksgiving dinner, for example. See what happens. It won't be fun for everybody. Now, if you're the kind of troublemaker like I am, it will be. It might be fun for you, but for everybody, no. It's generally a bad idea. And I think we should go back to that personally. I don't think it's anybody's business who anybody votes for. If you choose to share it, great, but it shouldn't be compulsory, and you shouldn't be punished for it, no matter what. I don't believe, even the guys who voted for Biden, people who voted for Biden, the ones who actually voted for Biden, as opposed to, you know, the inflated numbers that they gave us. I don't believe that those people should be punished for voting how they wanted to. I really don't. I think that at the end of the day, they're citizens too, and we all have to live in this country together. And if we don't find a way to do that, we are going to end up bloodying each other's noses in a way that we can't come back from. I really do believe that. That just but I don't think they should be punished for casting a vote. I really don't. When it comes to representatives, on the other hand, the way you punish them is you primary them. You vote them out. You replace them with somebody who will do the job that you ask them to do. Liz Cheney, who was my representative, was not representing the people of Wyoming, period. Now, I know she had an R after her name and all that, but I mean, she spent the majority of the last year going after the one candidate that almost all of Wyoming fucking voted for. This January 6th commission shit, all of that is about punishing the last president, which is an unprecedented thing, by the way. They don't, you don't do this shit. If you did, I mean, I could think of probably 30 presidents that we've had who would be indicted on something. I mean, I liked Reagan, but Reagan's cabinet and Reagan's administration was in large part responsible for the crack epidemic. That's fucked up. It's not cool. They hurt a lot of people. Yeah. Other things he did, making peace with the U.S.A. Showing Gorbachev there was another way. I mean, all that contributed to the Berlin Wall falling. And I think in some ways that was really good. In other ways, a lot of those states, those former Soviet states, ended up not recovering well from that, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. A little chaos at Thanksgiving ain't that bad. Well, I mean, I agree with you. Most of my family does not. I'm just putting that out there. So yeah, she didn't represent us. She wasn't representing us. Hell, she didn't even live in Wyoming. She has property here. Her family has property here, but they don't live here. And when they are here, if they're not doing campaign shit, they refuse to speak to their constituents. Or she did, rather. Although, yeah, her father, Dick Cheney, who was vice president under George W. Bush, also had a nasty habit of just doing whatever the hell he felt like. And most of that did not include answering to the people who voted him in, which, yeah, I mean, it's a pretty huge mistake if you ask me. The guy's fucked up. And they come from a family that's, had too much money and political power for 100 years. I mean, it's, not that I mean, let me be clear about something. I am a capitalist. If your family earned money, you should be able to keep it. I do believe that. I just don't like the Cheneys, you know. So I'm glad that she won't be. She's been primaried. She won't be in the running. Now, there's no guarantee that Hageman will win, but I think that There is a red supermajority in this state. Even had all of the Democratic population of Wyoming, which is more or less just Teton and Albany counties, had they all switched over to uh, Republican in order to vote for her, she still would have lost. And actually, Styx Hexenhammer did a really great video on a breakdown of that just before the primaries happened, and he was accurate and he was right. Um, so, glad she's gone. Getting a little off track again, and I apologize about that. We'll either be on track or off track. We'll just see how this goes. Um, but this shit here, he wasn't condemning 74 million people. That is a flat lie. Now, initially in his speech, no, he wasn't. He was talking specifically about MAGA Republicans who were getting into Congress. Um, and they're doing it by the fucking truckload, which is great because, frankly, we need to shake stuff up. The two-party system that we got going on just, it's not making things better. I mean, they're constantly at each other's throats. They're constantly stepping on each other's toes. They're constantly refusing to work together. And that's not even talking about the fucking evil that lives in each of those parties. That's just, that's basic just not being able to get along shit. And they just don't. And he's not wrong about that. There is a second party, or a third party, rather, a third effective party. The problem with the Tea Party and the Independent Party and the Green Party and all those, the reason that they didn't take off as well as they thought they were going to, because it's one thing to do a grassroots campaign. It's great to do a grassroots campaign. I actually encourage that kind of thing. I think that building ground support and maintaining a connection with the people who help you along the way is important in this. That's a good thing, but they didn't focus on building any kind of party infrastructure, right? And that has hurt them because the two big parties have had infrastructure in this country for 200 and some odd years. They've got their shit going on. Now, what the MAGA party is doing right in terms of being a third party, and I don't think that it's officially a party or anything, obviously, is that by operating within the Republican Party, they are using the infrastructure that the Republicans had already established for hundreds of years, which is actually pretty smart. I think the Communist Party is doing the same thing, but inside the Democrats. Although, if you ask me, they've kind of always been commies, but at least to the extent that's been a thing. Explicit effort by Biden to marginalize Trump and his followers. Notice that they go out of their way to avoid terms like supporter. They use it down here, but he's using it specifically to, so asked on Friday if he considered all Trump supporters a threat to the country. Biden said, I don't consider any Trump supporter a threat to the country. So he's talking about followers. Now, that's an important delineation. Followers or adherents, as they said earlier, indicate a kind of blind devotion, which I don't think is healthy for anybody. I don't think that that's a good way to be. You should never be blindly devoted to a man. If you want to do that with a god or whatever, then that's one thing. Although even then, I think that there are probably limits to where that's smart. But you should never be blindly devotional to a man. I don't care what side he's on. Trump ain't perfect. He's just as human as everybody else. And everybody who's ever been in Washington has probably had some kind of dirty laundry that the rest of us would shudder to hear about. I don't doubt that for a second. I think that he was probably better for this country than Biden is. But in fact, I know he was better for this country, but I don't believe that he was a perfect man or a perfect candidate. He was probably the best we had right now. And some people would say these days that DeSantis should run, and I think that would be a massive fucking mistake. Not that I have a problem with DeSantis. I actually love what he's doing in Florida, but I think that that's where he needs to be. He does not need to be in the White House. He can do more good governing Florida than he ever could in Washington. Washington's useless and it's bloated, and it's a parasite on this country. It feeds off of us. It feeds off of our tax dollars, um, and it contributes nothing but more and more and more legislation. Now, and that's the big problem with Congress, is that if they're not legislating, then they get voted out, which is a bit of a catch-22, because if they're legislating, that means that they're imposing new laws on freedom. You know, passing new legislature is a problem. It is. They shouldn't be doing that, I don't think. But there's an argument to be had that, if they're not passing legislation, what the fuck are they doing there? Why have a Congress at all? Now, the way that the government is set up with the three branches and the checks and balances, there is a purpose for them. They're there to make sure that the other two branches don't get out of hand, just like the other two branches are there to make sure everybody else doesn't get out of hand. I mean, they're supposed to complement and check each other in sort of a political game of paper, rock, scissors, which I think is the way it should be. And that, I would argue, is their purpose for being there. But they're constantly passing or seeking to pass new legislation. And what new legislation means is more restrictions on freedom, period. And they shouldn't be doing that. We have more laws than we need. Many, many, many more laws than we need. And I'm not advocating for lawlessness by any means, but I think that we could probably pare it down to, a reasonable level, which obviously we're not doing. I mean, the more bloated they get, the more they get, voting for more pay and, ignoring their constituents at the behest of special interest groups. And I mean, this Green New Deal, for instance, is going to be a disaster. And, they modeled it on the New Deal, which was a disaster, and like it or not, guys, FDR had commie leanings. The man won 4 fucking terms in office. He's the reason that we only have 2 terms for the presidency, and the only reason he didn't, finish that 4th term is because he died like shortly into it. That he had no intention of leaving that office, and for all intents and purposes, he never did. But he was looking to stay in power, and that was going to be a problem, because it would, if he had been a healthier man, not stricken with polio and whatever else he had going on, odds are he would have at some point disbanded Congress and probably neutered the Supreme Court and just extended his reach over everything. I fully believe that. But yeah, he is the reason for 2 terms for the presidency. Now, when they did that, when they voted for term limits for the president's office, that was an example of the checks and balances working, of the checks and balances being in action, and that was a good thing. What they should have also done is gone for term limits for themselves. I also don't believe that lifetime appointments to the Supreme Court are a good thing. Not really. It's good that we have we can occasionally have a Supreme Court that we agree with for the most part. That's fine, but I don't believe that they should be lifetime appointments. I think that's not great. That's a recipe for trouble too, because eventually you end up with guys who've been on there too long and know no other way. I mean, hell, Joe Biden himself, the president of the United States, as he is called, that dude has been in politics in one form or another for almost 50 fucking years. Does that seem right to you? And in that time, the few things that he has been a part of weren't great. Assault weapons ban in the 90s. He did some, God, I can't remember everything off the top of my head. But that one comes up, first and foremost, because obviously I'm very pro 2A. I think without that, we all fucked. So, moving on here. The explicit effort by Biden to marginalize Trump and his followers marks a sharp recent turn for the president, who preaches his desire to bring about national unity in his inaugural address. Now, this is important because he keeps throwing around this word unity, national unity, healing, bringing the two sides together and bringing our country fucking together. On its surface, not a bad statement. It really isn't, because we can't live in a constant state of being at each other's throats all the fucking time. We can't survive that way. Eventually, one side is going to eliminate the other, and it won't be pretty and it won't be fun, and it's going to hurt a lot of people. And I think that's what we're heading towards with this bullshit. But now he talks about unity constantly, uh, and he talks about Trump supporters or followers rather, as being detrimental to said unity, as being kind of a stint or a shunt that is preventing unity from happening, as if we'd all jump on board the Biden wagon. Because keep in mind, when somebody in his position who is showing the tendencies that he's showing is talking about unity, he's not talking about let's all live and let live, let's all get along. He's talking about you will come to see things our way. Period. No compromise. That's what he's saying here. Now, when he says this sort of thing, especially lately, you can tell that because that was one of the platforms that he ran on. He doesn't mean a fucking word of that. Most politicians, to be fair, don't mean a fucking word when they are talking about, what they want to get done, whatever they say. It's like you go out to the bar, right, and you meet a pretty girl, right? So the pretty girl in this case represents the American people, and you represent the politician trying to sway the American people into voting you in this case, into her bed. Any politician worth in the world is going to say whatever the hell they need to slip into that girl's sheets. And then they're going to use them, and they're going to get what they want out of it, and then they're going to leave them used up and dry and alone and broken, wondering what the hell happened. How did I let this happen? That's basically it. It's like, why did I choose to sleep with this guy and make this horrible mistake? Because that pretty girl, the American people, that'd be us. We let it happen. We let him into the house. We let him into the bedroom. We let him have his way with us. And that politician had his way with us. Make no fucking mistake. And that's typical of politicians. There are three professions off the top of my head in this country, high-profile professions, all well-paying, all of them predicated on lying. Politicians, lawyers, and actors are all professional liars, and to a lesser extent, law enforcement. Although in the case of the FBI, I think that's probably all they know how to do, because they can't seem to fucking do anything else. But a politician, an actor, or a lawyer, any one of those, pick one, that is a professional liar. They make their living by telling lies. In the case of a lawyer, a lot of times it's bending the truth or weaving real truth in with not so much truth. A politician does much the same thing, but on a grander scale. And actors, flat out liars. Their sole job is to pretend to be something that they're not. And I'm not bagging on people who like those kinds of things, who do that for a living or anything like that. I'm just saying that's what you do for a living. You're a liar professionally. And any honest actors out there, if you hear this, that, and if you are honest, you'll agree with it. And that's fine, whatever. But yeah, this national unity shit, this is a lie. This was his platform that he ran on, and you can tell. Yeah, he says, I do think anyone who calls for the use of violence, fails to condemn violence when it's used, refuses to acknowledge when an election has been won, insists in changing the way in which the rules to count votes, that is a threat to democracy. Now, insists on changing the way in which the rules to count votes is a nonsensical statement. It is. That is a very poorly constructed statement within that mess of a sentence. And I realize I have a tendency to run on too, but hopefully I make a little more sense than that. What I think he's referring to is trying to hold people who vote accountable, being observed at all times. I think he's also referring to the initiative to require people to have identification or some form of documentation that they are in fact a citizen in order to vote. I think he's referring to that because, you know, if you guys have been following, the left has painted that as a very racist move because apparently, you know, minorities, specifically black people in black neighborhoods, are apparently incapable of finding the DMV, according to these guys. Now, we know that's bullshit, right? And, you know, you go talk to them, they'll tell you exactly where DMV is closest to their neighborhoods because they go and they use its services because they're citizens like the rest of us. You know, it's one of the dumbest fucking things he's ever said. You know, so I think that's what he's referring to here. And I don't see those as a, you know, requiring ID should have been a thing in all the states already anyway. And it is in several states. It has been. Now, refuses to acknowledge when an election has been won. Now, that is an interesting one, too, because I can think of a couple of Democrats who refuse to acknowledge it, too. I mean, they didn't stick around in office. You know, Hillary Clinton, I believe, failed to concede to Donald Trump in 2016, which is fine because that's really more of a courtesy. They didn't have to concede that. It's a courtesy and a tradition, you know. And I really don't have an issue with that. Some people are sore losers, and that's fine. But it ain't one-sided. It ain't just, you know. And as we're finding out, there was more to what went on recently, which I'm not going to get too specific about just yet because YouTube's a little weird about that. There may be more to meets the eye on that, though. Now, calls for the use of violence. Who's he talking about here? Maxine Waters? You know, AOC? Nancy Pelosi? Most of leftist Twitter? You know, fails to condemn violence. Again, you know, that only happens when it's on their side, right? You know, they got to condemn that January 6th crowd. Got to make sure that they come off to look like the worst traitors this country's ever seen because, you know, oh my God, it was worse than 9/11. It was worse than Pearl Harbor, which I might add, only a handful of these fuckers were even around for at the time. You know, but here he's referring to a lot of stuff that you know, Trump said, not even just violence, but like certain groups, like hate groups and shit like that, which I believe are not nearly as prevalent in this country as people say they are, and not all of them are white hate groups. But you know, the find people on both sides thing with Charlottesville, and the president had been asked multiple times, in particular in one debate against Joe Biden, over and over and over again by the moderator, if he condemned white supremacy. And he said each time he was asked, yes, in the strongest possible terms. You know, but they usually clip that part out. You know, that's why you should watch this shit live, or at least find the full video if you can. So that is a threat to democracy. Now, I think he's a little loose with his words here. So when he says anyone who calls for this, now he's specifically talking about Trump. He's specifically talking about MAGA Republicans, you know, who are either in office or upcoming. But I think in general terms, you know, him saying this sets a precedent that later he can come back and just use that expression, you know, for any reason. Now, you know, people defending their homes are saying like, "I will fight to defend my home," could be construed with that statement as a call for the use of violence, or at least a statement, a threat to use violence, which it's not in the slightest, and is also protected under the Second Amendment and your right to defend yourself, you know, from all threats, foreign and domestic. Now, I realize it's part of the oath, the military take, but, you know, the citizens have the right to defend themselves from enemies, foreign and domestic, too, and they should. You know, um, a threat to democracy. They keep saying this threat to democracy. What does that mean? I mean, democracy is an ideal, right? Just like terrorism is an ideal. I always thought the term war on terror was one of the dumbest fucking things I've ever heard in my life. Because terrorism is an ideal. The only way to kill an ideal is to kill everyone who has that ideal. The problem is when you do that, you generally create more believers in that ideal, right? You know, um, say you take out a terrorist, but you don't, wipe out his whole clan or village or city, right? Somebody survives and they see what you've done, so they think that naturally the proper response to that is more violence. Violence begets violence. This is a fact. You know, um, but yeah, terrorism's just an ideal. That whole thing was just dumb. War on terror. You can't kill an idea. That's and democracy, same thing. Is just an idea. Now, true democracy in practice is mob rule, as we discussed earlier, and it's a nightmare. You know, um, it's just take Salem in the early years, Salem, Massachusetts. With the trials that happened there, or even to a lesser extent in Europe. Obviously, they had the same kind of results, but all of that was very heavily regulated by members of the church at the time and also of the nobility. But here was a colony town, and obviously they had a magistrate and everything. But you know, when the bad things happened, it was because the mob decided they should happen. Mob rule invariably leads to horrific results. Pure democracy cannot be allowed to take root. It can't, because it will signal the destruction of and the breakdown of society entirely. It doesn't work. I mean, the ancient Greeks who came up with the idea of democracy in the first place, they understood that. Now, I mean, they didn't give votes to children. They didn't give votes to crazy people. You know, uh, they also didn't give votes to slaves or women, which I take it for what you will. That was their, what are we always being told by leftists these days? You got to respect the culture, all that. I don't believe having slaves is a good thing. I don't believe it's ever been a good thing. Um, I believe that some cultures treated their slaves better than others, sure, but there isn't a culture on earth that didn't have slaves at some point, and a lot of them still do. As to whether or not they should get the vote, I mean, I think that probably in most instances works out a lot like the way we treat convicted felons in this country. If you are convicted of felony, you go to prison, you do your time or whatever. That's your penance. But once you get out, certain fundamental rights as a citizen, you lose, at least uh, for a while. In some cases, I think you can petition to get those rights back, but you've got to have so many years without any recidivism, and it depends on the state and the statutes. Um, but like you lose your right to carry a firearm, for example, because you're a felon. I don't necessarily have an issue with that to a point. Um, you lose your right to vote. You lose your right to serve in a jury, um, which is really a duty. But I mean, there's certain things that you're deprived of because you committed a crime. It's part of the punishment. And I think in a lot of ways with slavery, I think at least in ancient Greek and Roman times, it was probably viewed a lot like that, is that these people do not have full rights because they are not full citizens, right? Obviously, in a lot of ways, they were viewed as property too. But I think, like in Greece, uh, in the old Nordic cultures, they did understand that these were people. They just didn't have any rights, um, which is, it is what it is. But even they understood that democracy was not great. In its purest form, democracy is chaos. You know, uh, it inevitably turns into anarchy at some point. Um, because mobs, when they're done lynching somebody, they tend to, they tend to implode. They tend to self-immolate and devour themselves. If you go through the process, and I don't mind personally, I agree. I think if you have done your time, and if you have proven that you can be a valuable member of society again, and you go through all the hoops that they set up or whatever, I have no problem with somebody getting their right to vote and their right to defend themselves back. I really don't. Um, if they're truly rehabilitated, I mean, they've paid their debt to society, so let them be part of society. That's my feeling on the matter. Now, obviously, you got to be careful with that because there are some people who will never, you know, uh, some people are not eligible for that for reasons of recidivism or some people are just malicious, man. And even then, like you go to prison, you know, how often do you ever hear about a prisoner or a convict who goes to prison and comes back less hardcore than they went in? I mean, it doesn't happen. Prison hardens criminals. Period. You can go in for tax evasion and come out a multiple murderer. I mean, it's not a great system that we have now. I mean, I think it's better than some other systems. You know, uh, if I recall correctly, there used to be a prison in North Africa called Omdurman or Omdurman, something to that effect. That's basically a hole in the ground. you know, and they just chuck you in there, and that's where you were. They throw food down occasionally, and the prisoners would fight over it. A lot of people died of disease, of infections. A lot of them were flat out murdered. Some of them were eaten. It just it's a I think that's actually worse. But yeah, it is what it is. Okay, so he said that when people voted for Trump, they weren't voting for attacking the Capitol. Now that's true. They weren't voting for overruling the election. No, that came later, and I believe there are valid reasons for that. Overturning, rather, not overruling. Um, they were voting for a philosophy he put forward, and again, I think that that's an accurate statement. So, largely avoided even referring to the former guy by name during his first year in office, has grown increasingly vocal in calling out Trump personally. Now, that's interesting because Biden has been increasingly attacked for his positions, has been increasingly, you know, shown to be the fool that he is, and his policies have not gathered him any favors. In fact, I think he dropped like something like 35 points in the polls last night because of this fucking speech. Um, so it looks like when he calls out Trump personally and he's calling him out constantly, now that's a deflection tactic. That's like, hey, don't look at me and how I'm fucking up. Look at this guy over here. Let's blame all this shit on him. More than happy to take credit when things go well. Refuses to take the blame when things go wrong. I mean, that's typical. Yeah. Uh, Now emboldened by his party's summertime legislative wins and wary of Trump's return to the headlines, he has sharpened his tactics last week, likening the MAGA philosophy to semi-fascism. Now, what's that, like a semi-hard-on? Semi-fascism? Sort of rigid? You know, um, for context, the word fascism comes from fasciae, which was a type of bladed weapon. Instead of having the one handle, you had a bunch of thinner rods bound together because, I mean, anybody who's taken a bundle of sticks knows that it's much harder to break that than it is to break a single stick. That's what a fasciae is. That's where the word fascism comes from, stronger together. That's what it literally means. So when I say rigid and I make that double entendre, it's not totally unwarranted. um, Unfortunately, that's, what he's saying here is he equates it to the semi-fascism. Now, A lot of these terms get thrown back and forth. The right tends to call the left commies. The left tends to call the right fascists. The problem that they're not with that is that number one, I don't believe it's accurate of every single person on the right or the left. Number two, there are people on the right who are fucking fascists. That is true. I believe that horseshoe diagram is an accurate thing. There are also people on the left who are fascists. Communism eventually becomes fascism. Um, a lot of people like to gloss over this little fact, or they say, "Oh, well, that's not really what it was." Um, but the Nazi Party in Germany in 1938 through the 1940 mid 40s, Nazi is a short form of National Socialiste Deutsche Arbeiterparty, I think, the NSDAP. It comes from the NA in National Socialiste, and the ZI after the SO in Socialiste. That's where it's a shortened form of that word. Uh, Socialist, the National Socialist German Workers' Party Union. That's what that means. Now, socialist is in the fucking name, and they certainly started out that way. Now, a lot of the more strident socialists were wiped out when Hitler took power during the Night of the Long Knives. That's true, but he didn't see them as he saw them as opponents to his overall goal, and they did stand in the way of his seizing power, and probably were plotting against him, like he thought. I mean, I think everybody was plotting against him at some point. Um, Now, and people tend to think of Adolf Hitler as the worst mass murderer of the 20th century. That is patently false. He was one of them, sure. Uh, they like to talk about the 6 million Jews, right? 6 million Jews who were killed by the Nazi Party during the Holocaust. Now that happened, sure, and it sucks. It's fucked up, the whole situation. They never talk about the other 5 million people also killed during the Holocaust in those same concentration camps who were not Jews. He killed 11 million people total. His regime killed 11 million people total. Now this comprised of political opponents, foreign soldiers, enemy soldiers, the infirm, those who had genetic disorders, the special needs type people, gays, gypsies, anybody who was seen as lesser than or undesirable to achieving the Aryan idea of perfection. Now, given what we know about what he said about the Aryan ideal of perfection, yeah, Mao was definitely up there. Um, it's unachievable. Number one, Aryans don't exist; they never did. And number two, even if you could achieve that, you would eventually have to murder everyone in the world who didn't resemble that or didn't have the genes for it. The Holocaust was just the beginning. If he had been allowed to continue, they would have wiped out everybody. But that said, 11 million people. I'll agree with you, 7-1. Mao is probably the worst in terms of body count, sure. Right up there with him is Stalin, a contemporary of Hitler and Mao, who was initially allies with the Third Reich. And I believe that the estimate is that within the borders of Russia, Stalin either killed or had killed something upwards of 40 to 45 million Russians. Right, that kind of makes that 11 million pale. I mean, it doesn't really. I mean, you're talking millions and millions of people, and it's like none of this is good. But in terms of numbers, Stalin's got Hitler beat. 3.5 times the number of people that Hitler had offed. Mao, with his great leap forward, we don't have exact numbers on that. We can't have exact numbers on that. They don't have exact numbers on that. And they're certainly not telling us what they do know. So best estimates, somewhere between 60 and 111 million people were either executed or starved to death during the Great Leap Forward, which I believe lasted for nearly a decade. So no, when they say that he was the worst mass murderer, I'd certainly put him in the top three, sure. you know, um, but yeah, and neither Mao nor Stalin were fascists. Imagine that. You know, but yeah, so he talks about semi-fascism. Let's get the cursor back over here. I've got two screens, but just the one mouse, so bear with me. All right, wading into risky political terrain. We'll just skim over some of this stuff. Like I said, I did provide the links for it in the thing, and as it turns out, once you get me talking, I can apparently really talk. We've been here for an hour and 20 minutes. Well, let's just see where it goes. Um, all right, so the I love Scranton, Pennsylvania. He might have been born there. He sure as fuck wasn't from there. Uh, I mean, I was born in Oklahoma. I'm not from Oklahoma. I didn't grow up there. I don't have roots there. I mean, I've had family there and everything, but it's not. I think I've been back like twice in my whole life. And once I was just visiting, and the other time I was just passing through the Panhandle on my way to Texas. Or back from Texas rather. Let's see. Okay, who's saying this? Kevin McCarthy, House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, said it is the Democratic president, not Republicans, trying to divide Americans. I think this is correct. Um, in the past 2 years, Joe Biden has launched an assault on the soul of America, on its people, on its laws, on its most sacred values. He has launched an assault on our democracy. His policies have severely wounded America's soul, diminished America's spirit, and betrayed America's trust. And I think that last one is the most important. We can recover from the other stuff, but broken trust is nearly impossible to fix. Whether in a personal relationship or on a national scale. Asked about McCarthy's criticism, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said earlier Thursday that we understand we hit a nerve. Fuck you. Fuck you, lady. Quoted the Republicans' prior statements saying Trump bore responsibility for the January 6th, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. Now, first of all, it was a fucking walking tour, not an attack. Some people got out of hand. Yes. Some people were in places that they probably shouldn't have been. Yes. They were also let in. And they were riled up by dudes outside who didn't follow them in. I'm not saying it should have happened. I don't think it should have. I think it was fucking monumentally stupid, and I think that it was counterproductive to everything that was going on at the time. And here we are, a year and a half later, still talking about it. It was not a good thing, but it was not nearly the thing that they're saying it was attack on the Capitol. That's so fucking funny. Not 6 months prior to that, a number of cities in throughout the U.S. were on fucking fire. Hell, here just a few months ago when Roe v. Wade was overturned, what the fuck happened? People were coming after. Hell, they caught a guy who was going after Kavanaugh, planning to murder him. They barricaded everybody inside the Supreme Court, with the protests and shit. And it was just, what is that if not a terror attack? Threatening to kill them if they come out, telling them if they don't come out, they'll kill them. We can't kill babies, so we'll kill you instead. Sorry, that was a little bit of my personal politics leaking into that. I'm not above editorializing. Okay, Trump is apparently rallying in Scranton this weekend. That's funny. I didn't know about that. That's good. Sharp tenor of Biden's remarks reflected his mounting concern of Trump's ideological proposals and relentless denial of the nation's 2020 election results. Now, If it comes out in the end, and I don't believe that it will, but if it comes out in the end that the election results were legitimate, and again, I do not believe that that is the case. I do not believe that they will. Uh, Mama Susan, I'm not an expert. Kiss my ass. Free speech. I don't believe that is the case. However, um, if it turns out that way, then I could absolutely buy Trump being a sore loser. Sure. You know, I mean, anybody knows anything about the guy and the way he's gone through life, yeah, he'd be a sore loser. I get that. I get people who voted for him being a sore loser. I fucking am. You know, um, what I'm not doing is attacking people I disagree with. Verbally, generally speaking. I mean, I get arguments with people, and sometimes words are exchanged, but you know, I don't generally just go after them unless I see that there's a clear problem and a danger. You know, um, so yeah, equality and democracy are under attack. Now, he says equality here. He's been using the word equity a lot too, which is not the same thing. Um, Casting Trump and his backers and the GOP as a menace to the nation's system of government, which is not fucking democracy. It's standing abroad and its citizens' way of life. Yeah, our whole way of life's been upturned for years. I mean, that's not new. They keep telling us it's the new normal, right? Um, shit, things haven't been the same since the fucking Patriot Act. And there's always some disaster that comes along and changes things. Always something that tightens that noose of control around the necks of the people. You know, that's the nature of government. That's why it needs to be small. It needs to be kept on a fucking leash. Trump and the MAGA Republicans promote authoritarian leaders and they fan the flames of political violence. Now, that's untrue. I mean, yeah, there are a couple who are occasionally saying some shit that maybe they shouldn't. But again, determined to take this country backwards. No. Okay, so we're going to highlight this statement. There you go. That's better. Determined to take this country backwards. Backwards to an America, excuse me, where there's no right to choose, no right to privacy, no right to contraception, no right to marry who you love. Now, he did say this. I did watch the speech. He said, referencing the social illness issues that Democrats have looked to place front and center for voters this fall. Now, as far as the no right to privacy thing goes, yes, we technically have a right to privacy, but the Patriot Act, which has never been repealed, the second Patriot Act, I believe, has never been repealed, limits that right to privacy. So does any kind of like public figure. What I'm doing right now on YouTube actually limits my right to privacy. It's part of the reason I don't show my face or give my name. The other part of the reason is because of what my job is, because I do have a day job. But there are limits to that because I'm putting myself out there in the public eye. So, like right to privacy only extends so far if you're in the public eye. And if you're in public, you can be, as long as you're not a minor, you can be filmed or spoken to, or anybody can come up and do whatever. And your right to privacy doesn't extend that far. Now, in your own home, sure. But I would argue that recent events involving certain government agencies violates that right to privacy a hell of a lot more. Like it or not, these guys don't want to admit this, but Trump is an American citizen, and he still has rights as an American citizen. And one of those rights is, as outlined in the Constitution, is a protection from illegal search and seizure, Fourth Amendment. Which goes along with the right to privacy. So, as far as no right to contraception, now that's not true. Now I understand that there are some conservatives who want to make it illegal to use prophylactics, that kind of thing. Yes, saying what I want politically, 7-1, yes, that would absolutely get me fired. I work in local government. Now, not doing anything like, super high up or anything, but because, anybody who works for government is bound partially by the terms of their employment, which, if you've ever worked for government before, you can't be seen as choosing a political side one way or the other. And if you do so, um, and it appears that you are endorsing one side or the other, then as an employee, you can be seen as representing your employer, the government, as being on one side or the other when they have to maintain that partisan illusion. Now, we all know that that is an illusion, but they have to maintain that illusion, and legally, yes, they can fire you for this sort of thing. And they do watch our social medias. They do watch what we do out in public and all that stuff. And you know, call me whatever, but they're also paying for my kids' health insurance. So, you know, I'm not going to do anything to jeopardize that if I can help it. To a point, obviously there are limits, but excuse me, I'm going to take a drink of water here real quick. Apologize about this. So, uh, where were we? We got. Oh yeah, right to privacy. No right to contraception. That's bullshit. You can still use condoms. The pill is readily available, although I don't recommend it because it really fucks up a woman's biological systems. The hormone production gets all out of whack and it causes problems. And if I understand it correctly, some of those hormone problems can lead to cancerous growths and that sort of thing. Really not good for you. The pill isn't. IUDs, a lot of those have similar issues where they'll cause problems, or they'll like embed themselves inside the cervix and end up causing a cyst or all kinds of issues. But they're still available. They I mean, they're not talking about that now. What they're talking about in terms of contraception, is limiting access to the morning after pill, which can be sometimes, sometimes can be seen as an abortion pill. Although, if I understand the morning after pill, if I understand how that works, I think after a certain period of time, it no longer will work. But I don't know what that length of time is. I don't know too much about the pill myself. As far as regular birth control that you take constantly, yeah, that fucks up your body's regulations and all of that. But it's still available. There's always condoms. I understand some people who are allergic to latex. You can get them made out of other things. Sheepskin is still a thing. It's a little weird if you ask me, but you can get it. Abstinence is a choice. Adoption is a choice. You don't diaphragms. Yeah, you use a diaphragm. That kind of thing. Which is basically a really big condom. um, you know, dudes. By the way, dudes out there, right? If you don't want to have kids with a woman, number one, best choice, don't sleep with them in the first place. That's always the best option. Abstinence is always the best option if you're talking strictly on a preventing pregnancy kind of level. Always the best option, abstinence, because sure, you might be a little physically frustrated from that, but no one actually gets hurt. Period. From that. There's always I mean, you can always pull out too, although that one's tricky. It's tricky. And none of these are, 100% effective except abstinence. Um, and it's like if you're looking to prevent a pregnancy, just don't have sex. It's that simple. If you get pregnant and you can't or won't or don't want to raise the kid, find someone who will. There are other options. But that aside, yeah, that's you know, there is a misconception on the left that abortion is contraception, and that's not the case. Conception's already happened to get to that point. So contraception, prophylactics, that sort of thing are a preventative measure to prevent that from occurring in the first place. I got no issue with that, and I know that there are some people who see it as a problem. Catholics, for example, have always been dead set against contraception in terms of they believe that it's a sin to prevent uh, pregnancy. And I don't necessarily agree with that, but they do see that, and I kind of get that. But at the same time, yeah, as far as I know, there's no real push to remove right to contraception. No right to marry who you love. I mean, I don't know about that one. That one's tricky. There's a lot of conservatives who are dead set against letting gay marriage happen. I personally don't give a shit. They want to be miserable like everybody else. Fine. I'm not the first to say that, and I won't be the last. Um, they don't have to call it marriage. You can call it civil union. You can call it whatever. You still get the same, rights, privileges, and taxation thereof. That's fine. Or call it marriage. It doesn't bother me. I'm not going to marry a dude. And odds are there aren't that many dudes who would marry me anyway. Even if, even the gay ones, they're probably not that interested, um, which is fine because it's never going to happen. But what they're referring to is they think that they're going to roll it back to outlaw interracial marriage, which I don't believe is ever going to happen. I don't think that'll happen in this country. I mean, if it does, that's a damn shame because I don't think it was necessarily right. Now there are people out there who think that you should marry within your own ethnic and racial groups, and yeah, I mean to a point maybe to preserve your people, but at the same time, um, that's how you get inbred too in smaller populations. You got to introduce some new blood, sooner or later, um, and that's what they're talking about, and I don't believe that that's the case. I know that there are people who are for that, but I don't believe there's any serious push to outlaw that shit. Um, so let's see. This is interesting, by the way. Biden's appearance was promoted as an official taxpayer-funded event. An official taxpayer-funded event. There were Marines in the background. It was clearly a speech that was designed as part of his campaign for re-election, right? Now, there's nothing preventing an incumbent president from running on a campaign. That's actually, I mean, if you've got another term that you can run for, you should campaign. It's expected. But I do believe that I'm probably getting it wrong. I think it was the Hayes Act. Yeah, I think I got that wrong. I'm gonna look that up real quick. Nope, not Hayes Act. The heck with it. There is an act that prevents a politician while in the course of his duties, or a government employee while in the course of his duties, to do any kind of campaigning or um, that sort of thing while he's on duty. While it certainly, if I recall correctly, prevents using taxpayer funds at an official event, using government resources to campaign. I'm pretty sure that's illegal. um, I could be wrong, and if I am, I'll stand corrected, but I'm pretty sure that shit's illegal. So promoted as an official taxpayer-funded event. A mark of how the president views defeating the Trump agenda as as a policy aim as much as a political one. Trump agenda. Yeah, well, I mean, everybody's got one. You know, uh, everybody's got an asshole and an opinion too. Red and blue lights illuminated the brick of Independence Hall. Now it's funny because the lighting. Yes, there was actually white too, but the way that the cameras angled it and the way that they used the color correction, that red really popped out like fucking Palpatine's throne room on the Death Star. I mean, it gave off some creepy like Chancellor Sutler vibes, right? Um, just yeah, that was they really focused on the red there. You didn't see the blue except in the wide shot and a little bit of the white, which I believe was just along the walkways. Um, yeah, and there was an American flag in the back, but it was pretty muted. Let's see. Yep. Prayer of Marine Sentries appealed to citizens to vote, vote, vote to protect their democracy. For a long time, we've reassured ourselves that American democracy is guaranteed, but it is not. Well, again, it's not a democracy. And nothing is guaranteed. The only thing that's guaranteed is death, and to a lesser extent, taxes. You're always going to be taxed for something, no matter where you go, what area you're in. It's always going to be some kind of taxes. And hell, in this country, they tax you on your death too. Uh, Great equalizer, though. I mean, sooner. What was that line from Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey at the end of the movie when they're all doing their performance and shit? It's like you might be a king or a little street sweeper, but sooner or later you'll dance with the Reaper. you know. All right, let's see. Might argue the country faced a similar crossroads in the calling months. He's referencing the white supremacist protest in Charlottesville, Virginia, which he said brought him out of political retirement to challenge Trump. Bullshit, dude. Bullshit. You were in the wings waiting the whole fucking time. I wasn't brought out of retirement. Kiss my ass. They knew nobody was going for fucking Hillary again. I mean, say what you want about Biden, but man, his handlers are sharp cookies. They are. Yeah. He cast defending the soul of the nation as the work of my presidency, a mission I believe in with my whole soul. Well, you'd have to have one first, fucko. And I don't believe that he does. I believe that man is rotten to the core. I also believe that his mind is going, but so you take that with a grain of salt. People go, oh well, he's clearly a victim of elder abuse or clearly drugging him, and that's probably all true. But I'm not talking about Biden just right now. I'm talking about Biden throughout the course of his career. Man's a piece of shit, always has been. Iowa GOP Chair Jeff Kaufman said the statement is using the tactics of an authoritarian regime. Now, that is true. Well, not even just the tactics, but the aesthetics of the authoritarians. You single pulpit, you got soldiers on either side of you, muted colors, threatening colors, right? Waving his hands around, shaking his fists. I mean, if Biden had any kind of yeah, I think he did. If he had any kind of charisma at all, which he has none, the guy's a charisma void. But if he had any charisma at all, it would have been echoes of Hitler. But as it was just like, some Team America puppeteering going on there, it looked like. He looked like a frail old man, flailing in the wind. He did. His words were the problem. But you got to keep in mind, too, man, he's reading off a teleprompter. He didn't write that shit. And I doubt he believes any of it. See, trying to turn his political opponents into an enemy of the state. That is accurate. Expert on democracy and senior fellow at the Hoover Institute at Stanford University is calling Trump out for attacks on democracy. Okay, an expert on democracy is calling somebody out on democracy. If you're an expert on democracy, then you know that this is not a democracy. It is a constitutional representative republic with democratic processes. It's not a democracy. It has never been a democracy. People who say that it's a democracy do not understand what a democracy is. It's democracy is mob rule. Democracy is what happens when 51% think that they can take the other 49 shit. Just flat take it from them. They all decide, yeah, you're going to do things our way, and that's just it. That's what it is. And I'm not saying our system's perfect either. It's not, far from it, but it's a little bit better than that. The expert on democracy can be manipulated or framed as being partisan, and if you don't call it out, you are shrinking from an important challenge in the defense of democracy. Fuck you, dude. Manipulated or framed as being partisan. Oh, this whole thing is partisan. You're part. This guy right here just made a fucking partisan statement. And in that partisan statement said being partisan was a bad thing. I can't deal with that. It's too much. You can't be pro-insurrectionist and pro-American. Well, actually, rising up against a perceived tyranny, a perceived injustice, is as bad as fucking American as it gets. The Revolutionary War, the one where a bunch of farmers with secondhand muskets beat the most powerful military in the world at that time, drove back the most successful empire in the history of the world at that time. It doesn't get much more insurrection-y than that either. They won. That's why it wasn't called an insurrection. And it actually, I believe it still is by the Brits. They still call us the colonists. But that's just because they're pissy. They're pissy and sore losers, which is fine. District of Philadelphia is one, blah, blah. Okay, so yeah. There's not much else to this article. Candidates who dispute Trump's loss have been inspired to run for state and local election posts, promising to restore integrity to a system that has been undermined by false claims. I'd say that's a fairly true statement. Here we go. Lies surrounding the presidential race have triggered harassment and death threats against state and local election officials and new restrictions on mail voting in Republican-dominated states. Yeah, well, mail voting, by the way, mail voting's a fucking crime. Okay, or it should be. Way too easy to just lose a vote or alter a vote when no one's looking. Everything about that. There's no chain of custody with mail-in voting, so and that invalidates the entire fucking process. If you're gonna vote, fucking do it in person. And make damn sure that your vote gets into the ballot box. Because fact is these days we can't really trust our fellow Americans. That's a shame, but we can't. And I'm not even talking about. I know there are people who think there's foreign involvement in election processes, and I think possibly it's possible, sure, but just plain old American citizens think they're doing right somehow, fucking attempting to manipulate or alter the outcomes, that sort of thing. That's and that's not a new thing, by the way. Cheating has gone on in elections since elections have been a thing in this country. This is not a new thing. So it's people want to win, and Americans by and large, we love a good fight, and we hate losing. It's in our blood. So yeah, shit happens, but yeah, you can't trust people to do right by you. So you got to make sure, to the extent that you can, that your vote counts, that your vote is counted, and mailing that shit in. There's no guarantee. No guarantee at all. It's it's the worst possible thing you can do. I'd also say that the electronic voting machines are also not good. Paper ballots are the way to go. Paper ballots have always been the way to go. Um, Obviously you can alter a paper ballot, but it's much more difficult to do, especially given that you use ballpoint pen with you know blue or black ink. It marks the paper pretty good. And even when it doesn't, that ballpoint pen, it kind of presses in the paper a little bit, and it leaves an impression. So even if you were able to remove that ink, it doesn't. You can still see where the original mark was. Um, yeah. There's no evidence of any widespread fraud or manipulation of voting machines. Period. That is not a factual statement. I don't. I mean, that's what that is a definitive statement about something they can't possibly be definitive about. The only way to be definitive about that is to let all of the truth come out, and that clearly hasn't happened. Now, I'm not saying that it's impossible that there's no evidence of that. I am saying that we don't know, and neither does the fuckhead who wrote this article. um, Dismissed dozens of lawsuits. Judges, yeah, they did that. And then honestly, those judges should be called to task for that because their job is to ensure, in this case, to ensure the legitimacy of that election. And by not looking into any possible wrongdoing, yeah, your parents still do paper ballots, 7-1. I still do paper ballots. When I voted in the primary, I handed in a paper. I put a paper ballot in the ballot box. I show up in person because I want to make sure that it gets in there, and I think we all should. Um, but yeah, those judges should have been called to task because even if there's a suspicion of any kind of wrongdoing, they really should have investigated that. Even if it meant proving that there was no wrongdoing, they still should have investigated that. You know, um, yeah, just all right. It's shown about 2/3 of Republicans say they do not think Biden was just funny story. Some Democrats are saying that now too. And a bunch of them have come out and said that if Hunter's laptop had been made public prior to the election, they wouldn't have voted for him. They wouldn't have voted for Biden. You know, um, by suppressing that, they literally did change the outcome of the election. That should have been made public. So, all right. So moving on. Uh, Biden warns that Donald Trump and MAGA extremism they threaten the very foundations of our republic. This is from Deadline article. Um, and actually, if you will excuse me for just a moment, I need to run and take care of something real quick. I will be back in just a moment, and then we'll continue. All right. Okay, sorry about that. Had to deal with my bladder. So, all right. Uh, where's the cursor at? There we go. Okay, so Biden warns Donald Trump and MAGA extremism threaten the very foundations of our republic. Now, this is during the same speech. Now, this image is taken from that speech. Okay. Um, tell me that doesn't look like fucking Palpatine. Tell me that doesn't look like Palpatine. you or any number of other very bad men. And that was the lighting that they used. It was. That's Oh, nope, that didn't help anything. Hold on. Yep. All right. Yeah. So it is what it is. But it's not inspiring any kind of confidence. Yeah, literal throne room. You getting what I said about that? you know. All right. Let's see. Oh, you left a. Okay. All liberals I know have despised Trump, so took to Twitter that they were well aware of how bad Biden was, chose to vote for him because orange men bad. Quite asinine. Yes, that happened quite a bit. Um, not just Twitter; they were taken to the fucking streets too. It's like, oh, we voted for him because we just didn't want Trump in. I mean, that's like, you know, uh, oh, what was the name of that one guy? The guy who ran, Ralph Nader. Okay, Ralph Nader's running every fucking election for the last 40 years for president. He never wins. He's never going to. You vote. You voting for somebody just because you don't like the other guy is like voting for fucking Ralph Nader. You're wasting your vote. You know. Um, and in this case, you're kind of digging your own grave. So yeah, I agree with you. It's very very asinine. A lot of those guys are experiencing buyer's remorse these days. As they should. Because it was an incorrect choice, and they're going to pay for it along with all the rest of us. All right, speech in Philadelphia. A lot of this covers the same stuff. It's just a different source. I'd like to make sure that I'm not just reading from the one source. And obviously, I think that last one was pretty fucking biased. Um, Full blown. Okay, it was a full blown attack on Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans that represented an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. Oh, it's a republic now. I thought it was a democracy. You know, um, despite White House suggestions the address would not be political. What the fuck? uh, yeah, yeah, nothing political coming out of a politician's mouth. Yeah, I'm sure. It's hard to not see how it would not be seen through a partisan lens or that it even makes any difference. Fair enough. Just as the midterms kicked into high gear, Biden turned the attention on his 2020 rival Trump, who, by endorsing candidates like Dr. Oz, Blake Masters, has given Democrats new hopes of avoiding a wipeout by highlighting their opponent's weaknesses and wild statements. I think that that's stretching it a little bit. I think the reason that Trump endorsed candidates are sweeping the field is because people are fucking sick of the shit the Democrats are doing. And they're sick even more so than what the Democrats are doing of what the Republicans aren't doing, which is to say their jobs. You know, um, Biden's pitch was that while he's worked with plenty of Republicans when he was in the Senate and during his presidency, the driving force of the party is Trump, with an agenda of denying the results of free and fair elections, and if they don't get their way, threatening violence. Now, as far as driving the Republican Party, Trump is not a Republican. He's never been a Republican. He ran on the Republican ticket because at the time, and now and even today, you're not getting anywhere in high office without choosing one party or the other to back you. You know, um, when was the last time somebody outside of one of the major two parties won any position of any real significance? Obviously, there are Congress women and men and who are from like the Green Party or what have you, but it's really not that common. Most of them. AOC is an avowed socialist, avowed communist. Um, and sorry about that, lost my place here. But she ran as a Democrat, right? You'd think that because there is an official Communist Party of the USA in this country. It does exist. Um, but she didn't run with that party. She ran with the Democrats because the Democrats have as we talked about earlier, they have the infrastructure to back her up on that. They have the funds, they have the resources. Um, the Communist Party, I mean, they really don't have much besides the ability to infiltrate other things. But there is an official Communist Party outside of the official Democrat party. It is a thing, but they're more or less a bunch of ineffectual blowhards. Uh, all of the really effective communists have since infiltrated. All right, so yeah, with an agenda of denying the results of free and fair elections. They keep tossing that around too. I have never heard the term free and fair elections more in my life than I have in the last year and a half. In my entire life. This is another buzzword. This is to get those emotions flowing, to be like, oh, it's a free and fair election. You got to think of it as a free and fair election. Absolutely nothing wrong with the free and fair election. The more times they say that shit, you end up with this Pavlovian response in people's brains. That's what all of these buzzwords are for. They talk about democracy constantly. They talk about free and fair constantly. They talk about fascists constantly. I mean, they use these terms to get those ideas in your head so that when you see a thing, that's what you associate this other horrible thing with. I mean, it's basic fucking psychology, really. And people, as complex as we are, can be unbelievably simple in the way that we work. If they don't get their way, threatening violence, well, no, that wasn't us. Sorry. Now, there were some idiots on January 6th, sure, but I am not thinking of anything beyond that incident, which wasn't even the worst incident in the that year, let alone in the history of the United States. That was a bunch of Republicans running amok. It didn't happen because conservatives, by their very natures, typically aren't the kind of people to do shit like that. They seek to conserve. They don't seek to confront. That's one of the reasons that they're fucking losing, actually. Because the other side, they'll shake shit up. They'll get violent. They'll get in your face. They'll push those buttons passive aggressively until you get violent, and then they'll call you on it. They're the kind of people who would fucking poke at you and poke at you and poke at you, and when you took a swing at them, call the cops. I've known a few people like that in my life. So let's see. As an inflection point, fragile as democracy is, again, it's just an ideal. Biden suggested that most Americans recognize the threat. Well, we recognize a threat. This is a nation that honors our Constitution. I would say largely that's true. I would say that the people in office in Washington do not. So when he says we do not reject it, that's a lie, because the American people, I believe, do not reject it. I think that Biden and his ilk do. I think they spit all over it. So, I mean, what's the saying? Don't piss down my leg and tell me it's raining. This is a nation that believes in the rule of law. Largely, that's also true. We do not repudiate it. Well, again, we is subjective here. This is a nation that respects free and fair elections. There's that buzzword. We honor the will of the people. No, you fucking don't. We do not deny it. Yes, you do. You don't honor the will of the people. If you serve the will of the fucking people, we would not be sitting here looking at a man who looks like he's about to fucking turn nukes on his own country. Honor the will of the people. That's a fucking joke. This is a nation that rejects violence as a political tool. Now, violence as a political tool is flat out terrorism. First of all, that's the definition of terrorism, is using violence or the threat of violence to achieve a political aim. That's what terrorism is. Okay. Uh, so basically, right here, without actually saying the word, although they have said the words before, they prefer the terms traitor or insurrectionist or, you know, uh, what have you. Maggot is my favorite, where they just add like a lowercase t on the end of MAGA. um, I mean, yeah, I'm kind of surprised they aren't throwing Benedict Arnold around. Although they sure do like to throw Uncle Tom at black people. Yeah. Um, but it's that is literally what terrorism is. So by saying this, he's saying that anyone who sides with Trump, anyone who does not, join up with them, and ostensibly he's talking about people who are in office or going to be in office, but generally speaking, no, he's talking about the rest of the fucking country. He's inches from naming the American people, the people who disagree with him, as all terrorists. I promise you that shit's coming. It's done in increments like this. See, you say the one statement and it leads to the next statement and the next, and each one of us is a little more severe than the last, until you end up in a place you don't recognize and you don't know how you got there. I mean, it's the slippery slope uh, deal, but done in words, and this is deliberate. This is, his handlers are deliberately phrasing things this way, and it will get more violently rhetorical as we go along. I mean, just the semi-fascism. I still can't get that image of a heart on out of my head. MAGA philosophy is semi-fascism. Yeah, that's Fox News stuck to Tucker Carlson tonight. CNN and SNBC carried the speech. Actually, the speech was in a lot of different places, but yeah, those were the two main places to look at it. I think CBS had it too, and possibly CNN. Oh no, CNN's listed here. Sorry. Anybody else have a problem with the fact that the MS and MSNBC stands for Microsoft? I mean, just a slight tangent here. Fuck Bill Gates. Fuck him. Fuck that guy. All right. Now that I've got that out of my system. He offered rambling commentary that made the claim that Taylor Lorenz, technology columnist for the Washington Post, was the ideological anchor of the Biden White House. Oh, that's fucked up. But probably not inaccurate. That yes, Microsoft does blow. And here I say that as I'm using some of their technology, but you know what? Fuck them. Yeah, yeah, yeah. She's a technology columnist. No, Taylor Lorenz, for those of you who don't know, is the one who doxed libs of TikTok. And all libs of TikTok does is repost things that leftists have already posted on social media, which already makes them out in the public sphere, and no legal action can be taken from that. So instead of legal action, they decided to punish libs of TikTok in other ways. Obviously, it didn't work. Libs of TikTok is still around, although not on Facebook. Has been permanently banned on Facebook as of I think a week and a half, something like that ago, which is fine because Facebook is fucking evil. Let's see. Her response below. Yep, from Taylor Lorenz. Biden trying to figure out who the hell I am and why our names are trending together. Yeah, that's fair. That's pretty funny. I'll give her that. That's pretty good. I'm not going to click on the picture. I don't want to go to her fucking Twitter because but yeah, that's if she said that is pretty hilarious. Broadcast network skipped a speech as they have shied away in the past from giving up time in prime time for overt political rallies and other campaign events. Fair enough. White House Chief Staff Ron Klain argued, is it Klain or Klein? It's hard to tell. It looks like Klain, but I guess it could be Klein. It's a weird spelling though. on Twitter that the speech defended freedom and equality and democracy. They are as quote unquote political as Ben Franklin, saying in 1787 that the framers had given us a republic if you can keep it. That is patently false. The whole thing is a campaign speech wrapped up in a threat, wrapped up in a pseudo state of the nation kind of bullshit. Yep, Biden also ran through his administration's accomplishments, something that has given D.C. Democrats new optimism over the party's prospects. CNN Republican analyst Scott Jennings quickly labeled the speech like the one Biden would give at the next Democratic convention, what with its repeat of his 2020 theme of the battle for the soul of the nation. I do agree that there is a battle for the soul of this nation. I do not believe that Biden is on the right side. I really don't. And I hesitate to use that term too. When, in my experience, people who use terms like the right side of history never are. They're never on it. People who say for the people are never for the people. Not really. These are your Shays, your Maos, your Pol Pots. I mean, fucking Castro. Lenin, Stalin, even Hitler. Mussolini. Let's see. Who else can we drag into this shit pile? Perón, Franco. you know, yeah, they never are. That shifty little weasel in Brazil. Forget what his name is. After Biden delivered speech, the little surprise was his forceful attacks on Trump and the MAGA movement. Whether that is out of lofty principle or hard partisanship or both, Biden set up a contrast and come November, a stark choice. That's a fair statement. That is a fair statement. I'll agree with that. He did certainly present a choice to the American people. Now, that choice, excuse me, is side with us on the quote unquote right side of history, or side with these guys and be crushed beneath our boot heels. Those are the choices. That's it. That's what they're saying. Those are your choices. That's what we've got to look forward to. That's it's unfortunate. It's not. It's I don't know. I think we have a despot in the makings in the White House, except that I don't think he's the actual despot. I think he's a fucking mouthpiece. I think he's a figurehead. He is. I mean, he's not a good man. He never has been. But right now, he's a tool of people who are probably worse. And I don't, as we started talking about earlier in the stream here, him calling out and saying that these, the people on the MAGA side are worse than worse, and last week talking about how citizens who disagree, who think they could stand up to the government. First of all, the phrase he used was "fight the country." First of all, that's not what we'd be doing. We'd be fighting a tyrannical fucking government, not the country. Okay, the government is not the country; it is the servants of the country, and they need to be fucking reminded of that. But he said you'd need an F-15 or a nuke, and he did this by way of trying to convince people to give up the guns that they do have, right? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, and I'd seen this written down somewhere else before, he was basically making the best possible argument for getting more guns in your home. He said you'd need an F-15 or a nuke, and implicitly well, he implied when he said that he wasn't necessarily above using those things on the American people. And then he comes out with this shit and basically calls everybody on that side, you know, a threat to democracy, a threat to freedom, a threat to the sovereignty of this nation. And I mean, so soon after the implications of nuking his own fucking people. How the hell else are we supposed to take that? You know, and for anybody on the left who hears this, by the way, they're not just talking about the right when they say that. I mean, you think a bomb gives a fuck what your political opinion is? um, no, this is going to lead to mass arrests. It's going to lead to mass executions and mass incarcerations. It's going to lead to a lot of people crammed into small places. A lot of disease will break out. Uh, People will starve. People will be beaten. People will be executed. People will be dropped into big ass holes in the ground and the mass graves that inevitably come with this shit if we allow it to continue. And the only other option, unfortunately, is to fight back. And that will also spill too much blood in this country. I am not in favor of a civil war. I just don't see how we're going to get around it. And as I stated at the top of the stream, our children will see their friends and their neighbors killing each other in the streets over this. That may not happen tomorrow, but this is certainly a step towards it. And I think we may have just fucked ourselves into an untenable position as a nation. I don't know. And, us being the shining beacon on the hill, you know what happens if we fall? So does fucking everyone else. We're, as for whatever faults and flaws that we have, we are still the freest and greatest nation on the face of this fucking planet, and the freest and greatest nation that has ever been on the face of this fucking planet. And if we go down, if the great experiment fails, it'll never be attempted again. Successfully. Maybe at all. And the rest of the population of this earth will have lost the best inspiration to improve their own nations. And hell, if Schwab and his cronies over at the WEF, who have their fingers in every fucking major government on earth, they have their way, if the Georgia Guidestones are any indication, and they get the human population down to a manageable portion, which I believe they stated was somewhere around 500 million. That means killing well over 7 billion people, by the way, one way or the other. You would have to kill 7 billion plus people to get this down to that number, what they refer to as manageable. Yeah, they have their way. I mean, we'll talk about it another time, probably, maybe tomorrow on the Screaming Into the Void podcast. But Klaus Schwab has his way. I mean, he's doing it through economics and not so much military force, but the man is building a fourth Reich, and he's doing it under everybody's fucking noses. That's what the EU is. And that's a problem. It's a problem for all of us. So, not to wax too, I guess, depressing on this. I just felt that we needed to go over some of this shit with Biden and some of the shit that he's saying, and make better choices, America. Because when we fuck the other side, we fuck ourselves. Just saying. Make better fucking choices. And with that, I will probably close out this stream. Went on a little longer than I thought. Glad, 7-1, glad you were here to join me. Anybody else comes along and sees and enjoys this, great. If you hate what I said or disagree with it or whatever, leave a comment, yell at me, scream at me, praise me. I mean, I'm not opposed to that either. pass it along or don't. But maybe think about what I said before you dismiss it out of hand. And if you agree with me, great. And if you don't, I have no issue with that. Everybody should have their own opinions. Think about what I said. Don't just blindly jump in and agree on it. Thanks, man. I appreciate you being here and keeping me company tonight. So this is a new thing I'm doing, the solo streams. We had been doing a panel stream on Saturdays, 4 p.m. Mountain Time, which we're still doing. That'll be a weekly show. These solo streams will probably be a little bit more random. Just when I have something to say, or if I find a topic interesting, or just something that I think needs to be explored. And they're not always going to be political. I don't want this to be a political channel. This particular stream obviously got there. But I like to talk about all kinds of things. So we'll see what comes up the next time. I'm not going to make a set schedule for the Whispering in the Dark streams. They will happen when they happen. That'll be more of a pop-up thing, less of a scheduled thing. And then eventually, there may come a time when I figure out how to actually make like scripted videos. I'm working on it. Not there yet, but if I ever figure that shit out, there might be some of those too. I'll have to figure out an equally serendipitous and clever name for those. But yeah, this will be a thing. It'll we'll see what happens. And then meantime, there will also be the regular Screaming into the Void stream on Saturdays. Y'all are more welcome to join us there. That's a panel chat. So I've got a couple of co-hosts who are regular co-hosts now, and occasionally we have a guest. Sometimes. Sometimes we have people who would like to be guests, and it just ends up not working out. And sometimes we just don't bring anybody else on. But that one will have myself, Maester Chow, and the Hijabi Gamer, who has agreed to join us on a more full-time for that podcast kind of basis. And we're glad to have her. She's great. So all that said, YouTube, you know the drill. I am your dancing monkey. Like, subscribe, share, but above all, please comment. Talk to me. Let me know what you thought, whether you think I'll like it or not. Free speech and all that. And that said, remember, YouTube, it could always be worse. It could be raining flaming cobras. Good night, everybody.